the University of Austin, new university starting by our friend Bari Weiss and crew, to combat what the hell is going on in our universities.
Well, I just love that people are building something and trying to do it better. One of the real issues in American life is we all are just starting to get very, very negative about things like institutions and be like, oh, the media, like schools, you name it. And then someone like Barry and a lot of other people just want to actually put their money where their mouth is and say, hey, we think we can do a better job. We think there's a need. We can fill it. That's what I'm doing with the Forward Party. That's what I think that this movement's been about in large part. Is like, we can do better. It's like build a better mousetrap, It's like the moment you stop complaining and start doing something about it, then in my mind, I've always felt much more positive and upbeat and healthier. Because when you complain, there's like a kind of negative sentiment that creeps up because you're like, oh, that sucks, this sucks. Yep. And then at some point you have to be like, well, if it really does suck, maybe I can offer the world a better alternative. And oh, by the way, if I'm right, maybe there's an immense opportunity there. Maybe there's a ton of value. Everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We're going to talk about what's going on in DC. They passed a bill. They passed a big bill. The $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. What's in it? What's next? We're also going to talk about the automation of home buying via Zillow that kind of blew up in everyone's face. So that's very on theme for us in terms of trends, mega trends in technology and the economy. Also going to talk about a new university, Austin University. I got to say, they picked a pretty catchy place in a name because it seems like Austin is blowing up. Today on the podcast. But first, they did it. They passed the infrastructure bill. Yay!
Congratulations, America. We did something.
Approximately 2 weeks too late for a certain gubernatorial candidate in Virginia. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but it's... I have to say that this was something of a comedy of errors where they would just go back and forth on a bill that was approved 3 months ago by the Senate with 19 Republican senators. It's popular. Something like 70% of Americans are for infrastructure because it's common sense. We can see our country is crumbling around us. Mm-hmm. There are bridges that have been shut down for months because they're unsafe. It's like you look around here, like, if anything could win nearly universal acclaim, it's infrastructure. And they managed to sit on it for months and months, but it finally got passed.
We did it. I think I was trying to take a step back in these big picture stuff, Andrew. It's like the United States of America is spending $1 trillion on fixing its infrastructure. Now, theoretically, there's going to be a ton of government waste in there, or it's probably in practice. But realistically, that's a good thing. It should be jobs. It should be stuff that needs to be fixed. And frankly, in my opinion, I don't know your thoughts on this. If you're going to overspend on something, I feel like infrastructure is a good one to overspend on.
It's really not possible for us to overspend on infrastructure. At least, I guess it's conceivable. But I saw one estimate by the Engineers of America who gave us something like a C- in infrastructure and estimated that our infrastructure deficit is something like $4 trillion.
So actually, we're not enough at $1 trillion.
It's a huge win. We have been underinvesting in our infrastructure for decades, essentially. And so this 1.2 trillion, and not all this 1.2 trillion is real because of the magic of government accounting. So 550 billion of it is new. Mm-hmm. And you should also know that it's not like this money is going to get spent immediately. It's going to take months, even years in many cases, for the investment to reach the economy. But I don't think anyone could look at this and say that somehow the U.S. is going overboard. This is a much needed, long overdue investment.
Right. So you've got, I have a feeling most people listen to this, they're probably well informed, but don't watch cable news or maybe have dug into this. So I'll break it down for you quickly. $100 billion on roads and bridges, $65 billion on railroads, which, by the way, if Amtrak gets an upgrade, even Wi-Fi, that's a pretty good win, at least for the East Coast.
The new Moynihan train station
In New York?
In New York and
Wonderful.
Penn. Yeah, it's like you stepped into a world of possibility.
Agreed.
So if there's more like that around the country because of this, home run.
Home run. They need a better food court, which is coming. Right now, I think it's just like a Starbucks and a small fancy bakery. $65 billion for the power grid, which theoretically is great if spent well. Hopefully on some clean energy, but also just climate change infrastructure in there, which is part of it too. You've got broadband, particularly in rural areas. You've got $55 billion on water infrastructure, which is, I mean, Flint is one example of probably hundreds, frankly. The United States of America, we're supposed to have good water, guys. $47 billion on cybersecurity and climate change in the way it's related to that. It was confusing how they tied those together. Maybe it's like, I don't know, they're breaking things out, I guess. Public transit, almost $40 billion. $25 billion for airports, $21 billion for the environment, which is, I guess, separate than the cybersecurity infrastructure carve out. $17 billion for ports, which is an issue particularly on the West Coast. And $11 billion for safety, $8 billion for more water infrastructure on the West, and particularly for the drought-ridden states. $7.5 billion for electric vehicle charging stations was awesome, and $7.5 billion for electric school buses.
Yeah, so you hear that list and you're like, I like these things. Most Americans will be like,
or we're bad at these things.
Yes. So there is one, well, there are probably several, but there was one big component that Joe ran on that is not included in this bill. And that is a move towards much lower emissions. There's certainly some sustainability in there. But one of the criticisms about this bill is that a lot of the money could just get spent on, for example, making new roads. And so there could be a lot of emissions and energy involved, and you're just like building things that have environmental impact. So that's one criticism. I wish that there was inclusion of something like a carbon tax, which I'm a huge fan of. So that this is a win, massive step in the right direction. But I will say that to the extent that there was like a vision for infrastructure as like a huge shift towards sustainability, like this is not that.
Right.
But it has a bunch of things in it that are positive in that direction in terms of electric vehicle support and some other steps.
I have lots of questions. I think maybe people do too. For Andrew. So the first one is, you had talked a lot about when you were running for president about government's core competencies. When you talk about UBI, you're like, well, this is a core, giving large number of checks, large number of people promptly and reliably every month is a core competency. Is infrastructure a core competency of government? It's probably not core, but it is something I think government has to do. What do you think there?
So here's the process. It's not that when you cut checks for these billions of dollars, really what the government is doing is it's cutting checks.
Yeah.
And so the
procurement processes.
Yeah. So the checks are going in large part to state and local governments that will then say, hey, we've got this money from the feds, and then how are we going to deploy it so they'll be able to make use of that money, and then that money in real life gets spent on a host of contractors who have great relationships with the city and state governments, being like, hey, when it's bridge repair time, and highway building time, or broadband building time, like it's going to be us. So when you ask about the efficiency of the resources, I think most of us know that a lot of these construction projects have ghastly overruns.
Yes.
And are, they cost 2 times or 3 times as much. They take 3 times as long. So there's a lot of that's going to go on. And again, this money is going to get spent over a multi-year period easily. Like the first real impacts are going to be from businesses that are hiring up to be like, ooh, this money's coming. We're going to get a big contract. So we're going to need to try and help fulfill it. And that stuff will have immediate dividends. Right. But we can look forward to really money getting pumped into various projects. So when you ask, like, is this a core competence of the federal government? They're cutting checks. And so you ask really, like, how good is the state and local government at actually putting shovels in the ground and doing these things? And that's like the U.S. in my view has been below average in terms of efficiency. Like, so there are some things where international comparables, it was like we spend 5 to 10 times more for similar projects
Yes.
as other countries. So is this a core competency of the federal government? They're cutting checks, which again is their competency, and then you hope for a higher level of accountability and efficiency at the local level.
So I've met with directly with a number of Republican and Democrat governors, and doing some various advising and such.
I just want to intercede.
Sure.
One of my ideas on the presidential campaign that some people loved and some people didn't like, but like I proposed creating like a legion of builders and destroyers, which
Right.
were essentially like this kind of bulked up
federal
Army
program.
Army Corps of Engineers type who just come and freaking just demolish things and always build them.
No.
With the thought being that, look, if the federal government's going to do these things, it should have some direct resources to deploy and not just funnel money towards certain projects. And one of the things that I saw was when you had urban cores that become derelict, it's like a real problem. And most of the time, those cities don't have the resources to do anything about it. And so if you just had a national resource where it's like, hey, this freaking town probably could use some destroying or building, because if you drive this country, you know what I'm talking about, where you see all these places where you're like, what the hell happened here? And then no one has the money to properly demolish and treat it, and a lot of these buildings become environmental pollutants. They become havens for crime. They become blight and reduce property values. So there's a ton of that if you drive the country, and I want to do something about that. Some of this money will probably find its way in that direction, but I did propose actually having a national force for it. All right, we're going to talk about modernity, environmentalism, and tushy. Oh, it's true. A lot of other countries have figured out that it's easier on everyone if you use some water instead of toilet paper. And that's what tushy does. It's a modern bidet. It just gets affixed to your toilet. I know it's a little bit funny, but it's also a lot awesome. It's one reason why I'm very happy to talk tushy on the pod. Tushy's practical. It can reduce your toilet paper use by 80%. It saves you money over time. It's good for the planet. If this sounds good to you, start washing with Tushy. Go to hellotushy.com/yang to get 10% off plus free shipping. Again, that's hellotushy.com/yang for 10% off. And after you buy and install it, you can show it off. You can tag it on Hello Tushy on Instagram, and then they will be very happy with you. But it's good for you, good for the planet, good for everyone.
I was going to say, I met with a number of Republican and Democrat governors, and here's how this process works. When a bill like this is passed, you're basically giving states, particularly governors, not carte blanche, there are restrictions, but you basically you're putting the power of the purse here with this money in their hands. They have a procurement process for companies to enter their system, pitch the government, 6 to 9 months. Sometimes it's longer to get in there. So usually it's when moments like this happen, if they're not in the system, a new competitor, that's what I'm concerned maybe about some of these like rural broadband offerings where you have like ancient companies who, the new tech hasn't necessarily done the procurement process across states, right? Because there's a lot of them to do, state by state Wi-Fi and fiber optics and things like that. But basically what we're doing is investing in state leadership, I think. Like they're going to be the ones that put this stuff to work. And I'm going to make a call because I'm 1 for 1 since we started Forward Podcast, called the Call of Philosophy, if you will. I think the red state governors are going to be better at this than the blue state governors because a lot of it is what this is. People are like, oh, anti-pro-business. I don't like these pro-business candidates. Fair points to that. But a lot of the job is to evaluate companies and their ability to execute and then oversee their project. That's a lot of what being a governor is, where you're writing these checks. I don't know what your thoughts are on that in terms of who's going to be able to implement this in a better, more effective way. I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of the money naturally is going to flow to the blue states because they have higher population density,
be by
and the
person.
infrastructure needs.
Yeah.
Like just the bulk of the money is going to go to the coasts in my mind.
Yes.
Just math and
For sure.
the rest of it. But I 100% agree with you that there's a massive government efficiency argument to be made that Democrats are losing, and it's to me one of the hazards of essentially one party rule is that if you have a very blue state or city, then there's no meaningful competition, and then you wind up with a lot of self-dealing and corruption, and then no one really comes to them and is like, hey, that was a boondoggle. I mean, you can see that there are boondoggles all over, governments of both kinds, but I would tend to agree with you that if you have environments where folks are a bit more mindful of efficiency and things are less political, then you'd see some output results.
Yeah, I agree with that, where you got to think there's a Republican or Democratic establishment, right? And if you're only staying in the Republican lane or the Democratic lane, you end up with no need or ability to change, right? You end up with the same company, same relationships, same donors, the Republican Party, that sort of thing. So, going to be fascinating to watch. My other question for you is on the politics of this, because I think that's...
Well, I will say too, Zach, is that at this point now the infrastructure bill has been passed. Everything is going to turn to the reconciliation bill or the social infrastructure bill, or whatever you call it. Build Back Better, the $1.75 trillion act. And one of the interesting dynamics is that a lot of representatives don't really want to vote on it because it's just going to get smashed into something different at the Senate anyway. We should know that this is going to be a Senate-driven bill, and that means it's going to be a Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema-driven bill. And so there are a lot of Dems are like, look, why are we going to stick our necks out and put the sun, the moon, and the stars into this bill when it's just going to get thrown out anyway? Now, there are some folks with political incentives to throw the sun, moon, and stars into the House bill because they can be like, we fought for it, even though they know it's going to get tossed out. And then there are more moderate Democrats who are like, I really don't want to have like the attack ad saying I asked for the sun, the moon, and the stars when I know we're not going to get some of those things.
Right.
So that is the political set of incentives around Build Back Better. Where some folks are going to posture and say like, hey, we put all this stuff in, and that's to really frankly, please their base. I'll give you an example of something that that you can have different opinions about, but they're trying to put immigration reform into Build Back Better. Right. And then a Senate parliamentarian, the rules person, was like, hey, this is a budget bill, and so you can't do that. Yeah. And so some Democrats are like, we're going to put it in there anyway, even though they know there's like a 90% chance it's going to get tossed out. And then some of the moderate Democrats are like, why do I really want to throw myself on this one, given that I know there's a 99% chance that it's going to get thrown out? So the politics are going to shift toward the reconciliation bill. And one of the main reasons why the infrastructure bill took forever to pass was because progressives were essentially holding the infrastructure bill hostage to try and get the moderates to support for the bigger reconciliation package. Now infrastructure is passed, and the momentum, and I will say this is something that some people were concerned about, the momentum towards Build Back Better is still there despite the loss in Virginia. I think in large part because everyone knows that this is the Biden agenda. Right. And so if you're a moderate Democrat, you still want to see to it that you have some points on the board. So just because this was not clear to me, and I follow this relatively closely, there are two bills. One we just passed, which is the infrastructure bill, and that is everything I just listed off, and it's pretty bipartisan. Very bipartisan.
Roads, bridges,
and 19 Republican senators.
So that was it. And it's 13. So I'll get into that sec. So then there's what we're talking about is the Build Back Better plan, which is going to be passed on our budget reconciliation process. That is, so the infrastructure bill was separate, was 1.2 trillion. This one is 1.75 trillion right now. It's a different bill, and that has a lot of things that Dems have claimed to be fighting for, but can never get there. Let's get the party to line up for. Call it paid family leave, and I have a whole list of the stuff that's in this. you've got paid family leave, you've got like negotiating prescription drug prices for Medicare, you've got a whole bunch of things that are more progressive, more pro-family, more social safety net such. On the infrastructure bill, 13 Republican House members came across the aisle, and all of your usual suspects of progressives got to do their virtue signaling performative empathy. And that's what our guys on the inside were saying. It's a loss for Kevin McCarthy and Republicans, but a win for Pelosi because she got a bipartisan bill and she let all of her progressives on the far left, AOC, Ilhan Omar, the usual Cori Bush, the usual suspects, they got to say, we're not for this because this is corporatist or whatever. They get to go on the Young Turks and say how awesome and progressive they are. But for what it's worth, like the progressives that I think you and I probably have more alignment, like your Katie Porters and your Ro Khannas, they were all for this. So the question for you is on the Build Back Better plan, how much of the performance is still going to happen, in your opinion? Or do you think we actually, and you kind of alluded to this, but do you think we end up lining up?
On the Build Back Better plan, the real question for everyone is what stays and what goes.
Yeah.
Because they originally had a bill that was twice the size, 3.5 trillion. And some of the things that you named are now on the cutting room floor.
Yep.
It looks like paid family leave may not make it in. It looks like Medicare drug price negotiation may not make it in.
You've got public housing in there. You get universal pre-K.
So the question is what makes it in? And again, it's going to be a Manchin Sinema determination what stays in. On this one, I think the pressure is going to be reversed where every progressive is going to vote for it, and they're going to try and cajole the moderates to vote for more and more. And it looks like everyone's aligned that this thing has to pass in some form. The political incentives are different for the reps because, again, a lot of the stuff's going to get massaged and changed at the Senate level. So I think that they have a lot of work to do. The Senate has a lot of work to do by year end. That the hope is that they can get this thing done by then. But you should see the House negotiations proceed, and they're going to send something to the Senate. Hopefully, like before year end. The thing I'm most excited about is that it looks like the child tax credit is there to stay. It's not. It's not like an eternal renewal, which I would love, but it is a 1-year renewal. And I suppose in the current environment, you got to take that as a win. At this point, it would be in place for a year and a half. And if you have a year and a half of families getting, $600 checks, I think it's going to be very hard at the end of 2022 to be like, and that stuff that actually has been doing great? Like, yeah, enough of that. So I'm pumped that the child tax credit is here to stay.
It's exciting. We're going to spike the football. This happens. Let me ask you this. I don't know about Build Back Better yet, but for comparison, the infrastructure bill just passed was 2,702 pages. I want to put that in context. That's more than half of the entire Harry Potter series, all books combined. That is double the size of War and Peace and the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. And these things happen like over a weekend, right? Over a night. So do you think anyone actually read it?
Well, infrastructure is something where they've been developing these plans for years and years and years. It's essentially lying on the shelf, where someone thought at some point, it's like, look, when it's infrastructure time,
I'm ready.
What do we want to do? What do we want to do? I mean, we've all heard of Infrastructure Week. It's been Infrastructure Week for years and years. So this is an area where there's going to be some well-developed thinking and planning because it's been lying in wait for realistically decades.
Right. I mean, you got to think, you got a ton of Congress members. They've got ton of staff. They can break it down, summarize. Most of them are lawyers, are used to this crap. So I do think like people have an idea of what's in it. Not getting the wool puller.
It's one reason why infrastructure, again, we all like it, is because the stuff is pretty real. Like there are plans. The Engineering Society of America has been analyzing this stuff for years. Like we kind of know.
We've known for a while that we were kind of crumbling.
Yeah. So I'm pumped. I think most Americans should be pumped.
I'm pumped too.
it's a tough time right now. A lot of us are down. A lot of us feel like, a little sluggish. The days are getting shorter despite daylight savings time, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of the times you think, hey, I'd like to talk to someone, but you don't want to bug your friends, your family. The fact is, no one wants to hear anyone complain. Honestly, it's kind of like the way of the world. So what do? BetterHelp.com gets you in touch with a professional therapist who will be your mental health resource on demand. I think of it as Uber for mental health. I hope that's a good metaphor for people. I hope that's appealing to you because BetterHelp works. It's awesome. Take charge of your mental health. Don't just let yourself be down. And at the extremes, this can actually be very, very serious. Like being depressed is a serious thing. You do not have to suffer in silence. Go to BetterHelp.com today. Live a happier life. And as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at BetterHelp.com/Yang. I believe in BetterHelp. Join over 1 million people who've taken charge of their mental health every day. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Yang. Treat yourself right. The people around you will be glad you did. Well, here's the thing that Democrats are missing in a very, very, very big way, which is this, I think it was Michael Schumann of Politico who said that we're in the postmodern era of governing where it's not how you actually govern, it's the appearance of how you govern.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, Andrew.
Well, one of the things that happened, too, is when is that people's perception of the economy at this point is based upon whether their team is winning. Like there was a period when Trump won the election, and then all Republicans thought the economy was better, even though he hadn't taken office yet, and literally like nothing had changed. But everyone was like, "Oh, now the economy
we're thriving." Yeah.
And so what Democrats missed in a very, very big way is that they just sent this message that they weren't on the same team and they were just bickering, and it was like all political posturing. And a lot of the country at this point was like, oh no, like this is not what we need. And then even if you pass the bill, frankly, it's not like anyone's going to see some, magical new bridge, highway, airport for like months and months. I mean, we're talking about literally maybe after the midterms of 22 that someone might see something. And so what they missed was really what Derek Thompson called like the vibes war, is that they completely lost the vibes war.
They lost the vibes war.
Yeah.
I love that.
And now they're gonna turn around and be like, but we passed it. And it's like, at this point, a lot of it's like, well,
you already complained.
You sort of established a vibe that, a lot of people aren't crazy about, and then you do pass it, and then like this literally could have been an enormous looking victory 2 months ago.
Yes.
But just if you drag this 3 months ago, but if you drag this thing out like this, then it's like harder to generate that sense of victory because, like the average American, again, is not going to see or feel this for months and months.
It's interesting to watch because you look at these 2021 races, which are not midterms, but political press is ginning up a bunch of outrage over upcoming elections, right? These elections come down the pike and the Dems aren't looking good, looking like we're going to lose seats we're not supposed to. And so there's this rhetoric from the Democrats are like, it's because we can't pass a bill. It's because we can't do X, Y, because we're getting nothing done. But then I also see from prominent Democratic, on the far left per se, but prominent Democratic leaders and spokespersons that, or critics that are like, well, we don't, once they do pass the bill, they're like, oh, it doesn't do enough, or it's not great, or this is corporatist, or this sort of thing. Are Democrats impossible to please? Or is this like, is this kind of what you said before? This is like, if there's no conflict, nothing's happening. So we have to find conflict over anything.
Well, the issue is that you essentially have two parties like lodged into the Democratic Party at this point.
That's true.
And so the two parties are going to have very, very different points of view. And you're seeing this play out over and over again. Buffalo, your town was an emblem of this. And so, what's funny is I obviously think that we should have more political parties and that we should have a system where these people are not in the same party. Progressives will very much dislike that argument because they think to themselves, no, we're going to take over the Democratic Party. Like we're going to win this thing from within. I'm not sure if that's the way it's going to play out. But in my view, we'd be better off if the Democratic Party were two parties, the Republican Party was two parties. And most people on the left would agree with me on the Republican Party, because then you would have a group of anti-Trump Republicans who are like, like you can tell that there are like the Trump Republicans and then the non-Trump Republicans. And the major problem is that the non-Trump Republicans have to act like Trump Republicans in order to keep their jobs. And so you have like that. And so I think anyone on the left would be like, oh yeah, I'd love it if the Republican Party were two parties. And then I think the Democratic Party should be two parties as well. And you'd have, more genuine negotiations and exchanges. But that's why you're going to see very different communications out of certain actors on the left, because there are folks on the left who will say, like this doesn't go far enough. And that would, I think, be a very consistent message from them, almost regardless of what gets passed, because a lot of things they want are dramatic, which, I think most people know, like I'm for some dramatic things too. So, like I don't necessarily think that incrementalism should like win the day every time.
I think the other thing is, I'm just curious to the timeline. So we're freaking out saying he didn't get anything done, but they got something done by early November in his first year in office. I guess what I'm saying, for context, Barack Obama and that administration passed the Affordable Care Act in March of his second year. Now, he had a financial crisis. He had other things taking our attention. But I also wonder if this like 24-hour news cycle that's only accelerated since 2009 is driving us to say you're not doing anything, when in reality these things actually take a longer time. I don't know.
I think that there were some genuine missteps in this process.
Yeah.
And people did complain that it's like, look, Joe didn't ask us to vote. Joe didn't put his foot down. Joe didn't have like a clear directive or vision. And I genuinely think that there were missteps. Here's my read on what's going on. Some of the stuff that Joe Biden is taking heat for, like not really under his control, but like, have there been some errors that where you'd look at it and say, you wish he'd been a bit stronger on that. You wish that he'd. I'll use
Right.
Afghanistan as an example. It's like
decision
to withdraw. Most Americans agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
The execution, most all of us can see that there were some problems, and like later the military commanders were like, "Yeah, this is not what
they didn't line up.
Yeah, this is not, and so But then when asked about it, Joe essentially was like, both
this was the plan.
Yeah, like the plan was the plan, and it was perfect, and all the generals agreed. Even though later generals were like, no, not really. Like we all kind of know that there was some shoddy execution there.
Yeah.
And so. So on this one, was there the equivalent of shoddy execution in terms of getting your party on the same page and like getting a thing passed before the midterms? Yes.
Yeah.
And so, like that, those are, this is part of the vibes war thing, I think, is that like the Biden vibes have not been great.
Mm-hmm.
There are different people. There's someone who, this is another issue, but like someone complained to me that Joe hasn't yet appointed an ambassador to China, which seems like an important relationship. And so, so someone,
I nominate Andrew Yang, although we do not want that job.
They wouldn't appoint me for a number of reasons. But
your Mandarin sucks. That's the biggest reason.
But that would be
better than mine. But
I wonder if that's a prerequisite. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
People over there. Yeah, I don't know. Get some Google Translate action in there. So, so that there are different things that different people take this administration to task with.
Yeah.
And I think some of those things are, like legitimate.
Here's my another question for you. I'm peppering you with questions. This is fun. Maybe it's part of my job here. Is this a problem with running an anti-candidate platform as a party, right? Instead of Joe Biden does not have, call it the populist love or like the love of the people. He won, as many would agree with, was that most people were anti-Biden or anti-Trump more than they were pro-Joe. And when you're in an executive leadership function in politics, it's easier to put your foot down if you're like, if you don't line up, I'm coming to your state and I'm going to support your challenger in 2022 or whenever the midterms are. And Obama was able to do that if he had to. Trump still is able to do that, and he's no longer in power, or at least elected. Is that like the core of this, right? Or is it just that, is it Joe himself not being an effective leader? Is it his age? I don't know.
Here's my read. So Joe wins the popular vote. Like doesn't have like a storming mandate, but comes in and there is a honeymoon. His approval ratings above 50%.
Thank
People are
God
like,
you're
okay,
here.
yeah,
Right.
like okay, we're into it. And now that early capital has been lost, his approval ratings at 43%, lower among independents. So he can't go and really bully folks.
Yeah, what do they care?
Politically.
Yeah.
There's some candidates who I don't think they feel like his his ability to uplift them is that strong. That's tough, but it's still the leader, and so Democrats will be like, well, we have to try and support him and get back to that point. I think that there is going to be a massive set of problems though for Democrats moving forward, because they ran against Trump, and this is part of the binary dynamic. And I don't disagree with some of this stuff, but that they ran on the sun and the moon and the stars. And then
Yes,
now
they did.
And it was really kind of like good versus evil.
Yep.
Like, get rid of the bad guy. We're going to come in and
Everything's
healthy
gonna
on
be better.
days. We're going to build back better, and like all this great stuff's going to happen. And then a lot of people are like, hey, this hasn't really been happening. And a lot of people are exhausted. A lot of people are very demotivated and de-energized. You could see that in the Virginia and New Jersey elections, where it's like, like the Democrats have real kind of fatigue and disillusionment setting in, and then the energy is very much behind the other side.
Yeah.
So does this continue for another 12 months into 2022? Unclear, but I would certainly bet. I think most people now would bet on Republicans taking the House and maybe the Senate at this rate. And then at that point, the culture in DC becomes gridlock central.
Fun.
Again. But this is, to me, quite likely, in part because it's been difficult to pin down the Democratic message, aside from, again, Trump, the worst, and COVID. And then neither of those things will work now.
I think they get it. They're going to get it done. They'll get a Build Back Better plan done of some sort, and that'll be a good legacy win for Joe. I don't know if it's good enough to win in 2022 for the midterms in 2024, but legacy-wise, I think good for the United States, generally speaking, depending what happens in Build Back Better.
I like a lot of the stuff in Build Back Better. Again, love the child tax credit, and there are a lot of other things I like too.
There's a lot of things I don't like. There's certain things I just don't think government's great at, but we're going to find out. Let me say this. The one thing I'm curious about this too is I think Build Back Better is such a terrible name. And I think Democrats are terrible at naming things, generally speaking.
They are subpar at naming things.
Yeah.
Do you have better names?
Yeah, I always thought that party should come up. This was Bill Clinton's thing. He said if he was in power, I think he was talking about the Trump election. I can find this. But he said I would call it the American Comeback Plan.
Better.
Which is way better. But the thing is, Build Back Better is so Team Democrat. Build Back Better. It's that vibe.
It's also triple B. It's like
it's alliteration, which is bullshit.
No, if anything, you'd want to be rated triple A. You know what I mean? Like who the hell wants to be like the triple B rating?
Yeah, we want the B plan. And it's this is a key, guys. Key to naming things. And Andrew and I have had these conversations many times.
I would name it something around values. American Comeback is good. Something around fairness, like fairness for families, like something, but that's actually too demi too.
Yeah, it's a little demi.
I discard.
I get where you're going, where it's like some sort of justice or
because
fair and
Americans sense that shit is rigged and that it's super unfair. And so if you were to be like, look, we're gonna make it right, like that. This is like an investment in families, which is a lot of what's in there.
Yeah. Well, one of the keys to naming things, and you and I have done this a lot, is use it in a sentence the way other people, you find a way that other people would use this name in a sentence and decide if you like that or not. Because particularly in politics, that's how it's going to work. So when you have reporters or supporters being, we love the Build Back Better plan, like that doesn't sound great. It sounds stupid. It sounds Team Dem no matter what. And frankly, you're going to win by probably getting some form of...
My off-the-cuff suggestion was literally triple F, fairness for families, which that now I think about it, that deserves an F.
We were brainstorming. We're shitting on this without a particular... I mean, I said American Comeback Plan. We don't have a lot of other options.
ACP is not bad.
That's not bad.
Plan's pretty good.
My point was, like, for example, I just think Republicans, generally speaking, are better at naming things.
Yep.
And But Obama was good at naming things too. So I thought Affordable Care Act was fine. Not great, but fine. Like good enough to be like used in a sentence and like be like palatable to Republicans. So Republicans said, screw that, we're calling it Obamacare. And I'll give Obama credit. It was like, shit, yeah, it's got my name in it. I love that. You're gonna give my legacy tied to like the first major healthcare plan in the United States ever. And it was like solidified him. So I think, but also it was easy for Republicans to shit on when you throw Obama's name on it, right? And it didn't win per se, but it was helpful for them. So anyway, something to think about.
Yeah, so the things that it's been called are terrible names. No one's going to get excited about the reconciliation plan. I mean, that's just a process name. Social infrastructure also sounds very made up.
Yep.
So American Comeback, more visceral, better. Who doesn't like a good comeback?
You could, hell, if they're talking about printing money, there's a million marketing firms that come up with 20 names that would accomplish various goals. That's what they get paid to do. So
Democrats generally just need to invest more in this stuff.
Yes, they're losing the vibes war. They're losing the marketing war.
And one of the things I said after Virginia is like that after they lose, they just like blame the voters. It's really like the weirdest set of behaviors. There was an article that said like, Democrats are agonizing over their loss and will change nothing. That was like the general.
Or we'll miss the point where it's like we talk about critical race theory and CRT being taught in schools, and like generally speaking, it's not being like baked into curriculums on a formal level or anything like that. But if you like go one layer deeper, like parents are upset because they feel like politics is bleeding into their classrooms, right? Where teachers are even forced or saying to make political decisions, and no one likes that.
And then the people who vote for one side get berated as racists.
Yeah.
And then, then they tune out. They don't.
Yeah. They're like, well, I can't trust you for calling me that. And
yeah.
So anyway, here we are. Build Back Better. You got to think of a new name. All right, moving on.
You could call it like name shit better.
This name sucks. Pass the this name sucks bill. That might be better actually. I wanted to bring this up, Andrew, because it was such a fun case study of automation. I think I'm going to say gone wrong because it definitely it definitely blew up for Zillow. But the net situation here is even more interesting. So,
well, this story before you go, this is 2021 capitalism to a T.
Yeah. Yes. So. I'll summarize and then we'll get your thoughts. How was that? That's probably better because you're going to have more intelligent things to say. So Zillow, you guys are familiar with Zillow because you'd stalk your friends.
Anytime you visit a place, you're like, how much was that worth?
You look it up on Zillow, right? I remember driving through parts of New York. I'm like, what's it cost to have a house out here? Like Zillow, right? But you could also, when you're looking to buy a home, Zillow is a great place to go. They get a ton, millions and millions, billions actually, but people go on their website.
It's not just you.
It's not you. It's all of us. And so they had something called Zestimates. It's an estimate with a Z in front of it. That's actually not bad marketing. Anyway.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've looked at Zestimates.
I looked at Zestimates, yeah, for sure. And so they've never been hyper accurate. I mean, when they first started, they were wrong like all the time, like barely right 75% of the time. Now they're within like 2% accurate, which is a lot in investing, but for you trying to get a ballpark of a neighborhood or a house, it's wonderful.
Enough. Sure.
It's great. But basically, Zillow want to get some more money than just selling ads. So the way that they make a lot of their money is basically selling hot leads.
Why would I help you buy houses when I can just buy the houses myself? I'm going to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, and buy houses at bulk smarter and then flip them and then make mega bucks because, I wasn't making enough mega bucks before. I have to grow to the moon.
I have to grow to the moon.
And so let's do this thing. iBuying. Is that a real term?
iBuying is a real term.
Look at that.
They'd buy it online. Like assets that are hard to buy, usually buy in person, some are moving online. So they, instead of their core business, which was basically selling hot leads to mortgage and real estate brokers, they started basically getting into real estate themselves.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
But let's buy the houses ourselves and turn around and flip them. We know the market better than everyone else.
Yeah.
We have access to super money.
Well, if I'm being fair, like if you're sitting in the room, the boardroom, or some of these management teams, Zillow, you're like, I could drink that Kool-Aid. You're like, we're the biggest real estate player in the world, right?
You're right. I'm being a little bit harsh because the fact is there are several firms doing this. Like this is an industry and it's not just a Zillow thing.
Right. So they take their estimates and they're
and also some of the big private equity firms have been making a killing.
Yeah, they're all doing this, right?
Yes.
And so they buy, and basically the concept, you buy it where you think it's worth, make the minor repairs, and you flip them. And the hardest part, if anyone's worked in real estate, is that real estate is expensive to own. There's insurance, there's taxes, there's repairs, there's utilities, there's all this crap. So you have to flip it fast. And so basically Zillow, they fucked up. Like they didn't do this well. And here's the numbers. So they bought 10,000 homes in the third quarter of 2021, this quarter, which is double what they did in the second quarter. And they were hiring a ton of humans to basically, like, they'd buy it with the algorithm, or they'd want to buy it with the algorithm. There'd be people vetting it internally, and then there'd be local real estate agents also vetting the deal as well. And so they hired 2,500 people in the first 9 months of this year to like build this out. But eventually they bought too many houses, and they had to sell a bunch of them, and they went out. So thoughts on this? I mean, you can dive in more in terms of mechanics of this, but Zillow automated the home buying process and then lost, let me give you the exact number. It was like $569 million was their like quoted loss, $30,000 a home they bought, and over 10,000 homes they purchased. Thoughts?
Again, this is really just capitalism today, where it's like you've got a business, you're making money, you got to grow, and then you're touching massive pools of capital for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got access to that kind of money, then you're like, okay, like how do we deploy this?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we letting other people make money off of our information instead of making it ourselves? Mm-hmm. In a way, it's like a version of vertical integration. There are other firms that were doing this. So if you were to defend Zillow, you'd say, well, you could argue, well, they have no choice but to do it because there are other firms that
have to grow
the space,
in capitalism,
and you have to
right?
grow. The knock on it would be like, hey, holding these houses, if you're off by even a little bit, could really punish you financially very, very quickly. Because if you're 1% off over 10,000 homes, over a 3-month period, that could add up to a lot, which is apparently what happened. So, you could say this is just an algo execution problem, that if they just gotten the math right, then they'd be okay. You could look at this and say, maybe there are limits to what you can do with
online
with
or automation.
Yeah, just kind of, maybe there's something specific about a house that makes it more than just like a mathematical calculation, or that this market is so dynamic that you would need incredible reserves if you're off by like a little bit,
right?
And at scale, like if you're off on 10 houses, it's one thing. If you're off on 10,000 houses, then it's another. And there is an emotional aspect to the real estate market where we can see right now that there's some froth in certain places, and it's there are like national patterns that are playing out in particular ways. I have friends who have real estate in Florida, and it's just been like the most berserk market known to man. Down there, it's like a freaking...
My parents live in Florida.
Has it happened for them too?
I've got a soft spot for Florida, but
they're like vacant lots that have gone up 2 to 3 times in value, just like for just because they're in
near the water or whatever, or hot market, near a hot market. Who knows?
Yeah. So, but this is the kind of combination of automation and vast capital, and the competitive aspect in some of these industries where you're going to see stuff like this more and more. And I will suggest too that we are in a very frothy time, and you're seeing occasional blow-ups. Now, it's not enough to stop the mega momentum. I talked to an investor friend who was very concerned about the climate. And then Evelyn asked, well, it's like, so are you going to cash if you're so concerned about the climate? And by the way, he works in real estate. And then he was like, you can't go to cash or else you go out of business. So, we just go. And so I think that's where we are right now, where a lot of people can see that we're going to go off the edge of, a cliff or the top of a wave or whatever, but you can't get off right now if your incentives are to grow and make money as much as you can. That's where we are in November 2021, in Andrew Yang's opinion. So, you can take that for what it's worth. But I think you're going to see a lot more like this Zillow blow up in the days to come.
So a couple thoughts. One, that scale to go to tens of thousands of homes, hiring almost 3,000 people. I'm sure they had more private contractors and part-time employees in 9 months is ridiculous. I don't care how big of a company you are. That is a massive undertaking. Because we hired a couple hundred in a month, and it was wild. Which you would need to be at a faster scale, frankly. So that's one. But what's crazy to me, Andrew, is my takeaway in this. The most mind-blowing part of this entire thing is that Zillow's gonna be fine.
Oh yeah, this is like
fine.
This is some pain, but then
they completely botched this up. Lost $500 million, not more, and they're going to be fine. Their apps and websites had almost 3 billion visits in the third quarter. Their online marketing business is on pace to grow 34% this year, and there's a strong housing market. And the other thing is the CEO has basically in a situation where he owns certain types of shares where they're not going to oust him, at least in the short run. So
what's the market cap of Zillow?
I don't know. Let's look it up. What do you think? Guess that line.
I'm going to guess
20 billion.
Yeah, low tens of billions.
16.6 billion.
Oh, that's pretty close.
That's not bad. Not good for prices, right? But not bad, Zach. I used to be in this game.
You said 20 billion. That's
we'll take that. Low tens of billions. We're there. Look at us. We could do this. So yeah, they're gonna be fine. No problem. I mean, their stock's down. They'll be fine. We'll weather the storm. You had talked about the fourth industrial revolution and a whole bunch of things when we were running for president. But there is a limit to the fourth industrial revolution where there's certain things that need a human, or at least will for the foreseeable future. Do you think this is actually an interesting question, in the top five job categories you talked to, or call centers, clerical work, administration, you got truck driving, I think it's number 4, retail, food service or food prep, manufacturing. Is there any that's going to hit that human wall that kind of Zillow hit in real estate?
I think you're going to see those things get automated more and more. What is the human wall? This is going to be tough. It's I think a lot of the jobs that we imagine to be the most human are actually the most prone to automation. Ooh. And what I'm going to throw out there as my number one example is therapy and mental health. That it turns out military veterans are more comfortable talking to a therapy bot than a real life human therapist. And the efficacy is comparable, and certainly it can triage to a human if someone's suicidal. So but a lot of people will be like, "Oh, you need a human being for therapy." It's and you actually an AI is better in some ways.
Wow.
So you can extrapolate that. Another thing I'm going to throw out there too, healthcare.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of the stuff that you want to do for healthcare is fairly mechanical and rules based. You know what I mean? We talk about bedside manner and doctors and nurses and all that stuff. A lot of us is we just want you to do certain things. Mm-hmm. There was a company, there was a number of years ago. Their one innovation is they got nurses to call patients and just try and change their behavior. And that was enough for them to become a really big successful company, because so much of it was around if you could get people to change their behaviors, then you can get them to be healthier and you save a lot of money.
Interesting.
In various ways.
Get the patient to behave differently.
So a lot of this is behavior modification, and I think technology can really help with behavior modification in a way that's more realistic than a person. Yes. So
wow.
Those are my 2 cents on it. One thing I will say that I think that the human touch is vital for personal training. If you ever had a personal trainer when the gym gives you one for free or whatnot, you're like, I don't need a trainer. I know my shit. And then you get one, all of a sudden you're like,
That's true. I will say, have you looked at Tonal? It's pretty awesome.
No, now this is not to say I have not also enjoyed the fruits of automated trainers and fitness apps and whatnot.
Yeah,
they're pretty good, and they'll do 70% of the job.
I agree. A human touch there is important. But Tonal's pretty sick. It's customized to your body weight and where you performed last time, and
Tonal hasn't even sponsored us. No,
Tonal has not sponsored us, but check it out. But Peloton, human touch, right? Like, you know, and that's a big part of it. I do think this is where the rubber meets the road, and we have no idea where. Actually, the one to me is like feels like driving is going to be like slower than you think.
Yeah, it's tough to automate driving.
Or people, or just like it's like this human trust thing, but it's not as black and white as you think. Because you'd think a therapist would imply trust, right? But in reality is you're actually just getting stuff off your chest. The only trust you need is that they don't freaking tell anybody or hold things against you and judge you, which a computer can do.
Well, to the extent that the human wall is going to be tough to overcome, and we shouldn't make it seem like humanity is a barrier in this way, but it is, in my mind, a lot of fine motor stuff in difficult settings.
Yeah.
And one example I used to use is like, you know, if you need to clean a hotel room, you'd much rather a human do it than a robot, because the robot's going to look there and be like, you know, what the hell's going on? You know, it's like all these like random things. And so you're going to have humans doing things in that context for a long time. I think food prep is in there. Like you can automate aspects of it. But like some of the fine motor stuff, you know, you'll have humans doing it for a long time. Yeah. Hairdressing, some of the examples I use.
Hairdressing for sure, because Edward Scissorhands is terrifying.
Yeah, no one wants to get a robot.
Just near your face.
Haircut.
But like the other parts of it, maybe, I don't know, massages. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting.
It's a tough time, man, because like I can see AI and technology, you know, getting more and more, and like the vision we have of capitalism, where it's like, oh, start a small business, we work hard, we compete. Like now, so much of that stuff's getting wrecked. I mean, you know, if you're an individual mom and pop investor, and then Zillow is coming around, throwing around billions of dollars, like buying, you know what I mean? Like the economy is just flowing more and more to these mega actors. There's like this consolidation at the top, and it's something that our government really just does not understand at all, because they'll just make arguments around principles on the market. Meanwhile, you have trillion-dollar companies that are defying every law of business physics. It's like you said, it's like they can fuck up, doesn't matter. You know, they have access to what Tim O'Reilly called super money. Yeah. It's like as soon as you touch the super money, then there are no more business laws of gravity anymore.
Yes, you do what you want.
Yeah, you do what you want. And, you know, we all can think of the companies that have that super money. I'll tell you another area where the super money is changing everything. Just movies and content production. You remember the good old days when there were movie studios and it's like, oh, they had like the special sauce and it's like, oh, I could make a movie and creative.
You had to be smart with what you invested in. You got one or two big blockbusters a year.
Yeah. Right? And it mattered if the movie succeeded or failed.
Right.
Now you have Amazon, Apple, Netflix just throwing billions of dollars. My favorite example in this space was that Chris Pratt movie Tomorrow War that Amazon bought.
Yep.
Evan and I watched. If you haven't seen it, it's really
I really liked
good.
it. Yeah, I liked it.
It's like you settle down, you're like, oh, it's going to be a random sci-fi movie. You're like, oh, this is actually like a quality Hollywood production.
Correct.
So they spent $200 million on Tomorrow War. And then because of, you know, COVID circumstance and whatnot, they just turned around and just sold it to Amazon for $200 million. It was just like a complete, just like zero gain swap. It's like, look, we made this movie. We don't want to take the heat for releasing and trying to make the money back. So here you go. And then Amazon's like, we will zero out your investment. And then it just shows up on our TVs for essentially free.
Minimal marketing expense too. I think I saw a couple ads maybe on like Subway or something, but not, you know, they're just like, here it is.
Yeah. So now content has become like an add-on for these tech platforms. Yeah. And tech has become the tail that's wagging the dog. So, you know, content itself is getting kind of sanded down. I almost tweeted something out. It's like, we're all content now. You know, there was that Bo Burnham thing where it's like, hey, maybe compressing all of human experience to like the algorithm like might not be such a good idea. Yeah. So that stuff's definitely happening. Again, like, you know, our leadership doesn't really understand. So content's the clearest one where that stuff's getting commoditized and automated, but you can see that happening more and more. And again, I'm going to suggest that most people think that content, like film and whatnot, artistry, humanity, emotion, like that stuff, irreplaceable. It's like, no. It turns out that I can just fucking, you know, like, you know, get the money, get the talent, get the algorithm, see what it is you like, you know, like send it down your gullet. And oh, by the way, if I don't quote unquote make money, don't care.
Yeah. The one that to me, it's going to change everything. And I don't know when we'll get there. I actually don't know if, but this is a big one where there's a certain level. It's like the business trust. I'm kind of as a catch-all where it's, all right, you have no problem spending $20 for an automated service, $50, or buying something online. You buy like a $1,000 suit you may buy online. You might buy a $1,000 pair of shoes, $500 pair of shoes, whatever it is. You may buy a car, right? $50,000, $80,000, right? Without touching a human, right? But there's a certain level, everybody's got different, where it's a big enough purchase where you wouldn't do it online. And for now, it's probably somewhere between a car and a home, and give and take on both sides. But if you look at a lot of business nowadays is like taking a company public or big mergers and acquisitions or buying a new office building or whatever, these massive investments. People want that human, or even wealth management, good example. Like, I want to invest all my money in this. I kind of want a human to tell me it's going to be okay or give me some experience. At some point, I think a computer's going to do that stuff because the job's not that hard. I've worked in that space, at least in wealth management, but I don't know. I don't know if humans...
You see the comfort level just going up and up, man.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You see something like Betterment or...
Wealthfront or these...
Yeah,
Robinhood,
like a while ago, you wouldn't have believed that, but now everyone's cool with it.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but younger people are cool with it.
Agreed. And that's the other thing. The younger generations keep growing up more and more used to it, and then it changes, right? So anytime someone says, here's my takeaway, I don't know if you agree with this. Anytime someone says, you'll always need a human to do X, what are they wrong? 80% of the time?
Well, certainly you should examine whether they have some
vested interest.
In having that be true. Because 80% of Americans think that most jobs will be automated, but they also don't think their job's going to be automated. Mm-hmm. That's just the way our minds work.
There's no way they're automating podcasters,
Oh, definitely not.
No way.
Yeah,
0% chance. All right, I want to shift to this because it's pretty crazy, and the press did not really do this justice. I don't think Twitter did this justice either. The University of Austin, new university starting by our friend Bari Weiss and crew, to combat what the hell is going on in our universities right now in the United States of America. So we can break this down, but thoughts on this? Thoughts on her move? Thoughts on if this will work? Thoughts about why? I can break down some stats too, but why don't we start with you?
Well, I just love that people are building something and trying to do it better. Mm. One of the real issues in American life is we all are just starting to get very, very negative about things like institutions and be like, oh, the media, like schools, you name it. And then someone like Bari and a lot of other people, Peter Boghossian's one of the founding faculty members.
Right.
There are dozens of people, probably hundreds, dozens we've heard of and hundreds that we probably just don't know who they are. Just want to actually put their money where their mouth is and say, hey, we think we can do a better job. We think there's a need, we can fill it. That's what I'm doing with the Forward Party. That's what I think that this movement's been about in large part. It's like, we can do better, we can build better, build better. Sorry, but it's
build back better.
Yeah, but it's like build a better mousetrap, Yeah. It's like the moment you stop complaining and start doing something about it, then in my mind, I've always felt much more positive and upbeat and healthier, because when you complain, there's like a kind of negative sentiment that creeps up because you're like, oh, that sucks, this sucks. Yep. And then at some point you have to be like, well, if it really does suck, maybe I can offer the world a better alternative. And oh, by the way, if I'm right, maybe there's an immense opportunity there. Maybe there's a ton of value.
I'm glad you're wired that way. Most people aren't. They like to complain.
And so that's the way I saw the University of Austin, is like, okay, there are people that are sad about something that's going on in existing universities. And I've said, it's like, why is it that college is 2.5 times more expensive than it was when I went to school? Did it get 2.5 times better? We know it did not. So what's really going on? I mean, I think a lot of Americans sense that these organizations have just started to, serve themselves in various ways. I think this is a major, major critique of the Democratic Party, is that among the things that are making Americans the most miserable, it would be education and healthcare costs. Mm-hmm. And we don't do enough to rein those in. I think healthcare is now up to 18% of GDP. You're not seeing better results. You're just seeing higher costs. Same thing with a lot of the educational institutions. So if a group of people think they can offer a better product, and I don't know if it might not be for less money, but who cares? It's like if you offer something better to the world, all to the good. I'm excited about it.
So here are the stats they reach, and then I'll tell you my comments. So nearly a quarter of American academics in the social sciences or humanities endorse ousting a colleague for having a wrong opinion about a hot button issue such as immigration or gender differences. A quarter of professors want firing people for the wrong opinion. A third of conservative academics and PhD students say they've been threatened with disciplinary action for their views. 4 or 5 American PhD students are willing to discriminate against right-leaning scholars, according to the Center for Study of Partisanship and Ideology. You can go down the list.
Oh, there was a study in Ezra Klein's book, Why We're Polarized, where you had people in a university setting dole out a fellowship. And the single biggest thing that they would discriminate against someone for is their political party. Is that if someone was the other party, then you would not want to give them good stuff. And the majority of the people in this context were Democrats. So there's definitely something very real. And I don't think it's good for learning. Like if people feel like you show up and there's like a right opinion, if you don't have the right opinion, then you're going to end up getting cast out or attacked by your peers or the institution itself. That is something that I think people ought to be concerned about, because if everyone's getting trained the same way, that's not what you'd want culturally or intellectually.
So this is getting spun as like an anti-woke or intellectual dark web university, and there's a lot of names we can read off some. But here's what I want to say. I just spoke a couple weeks ago at NYU here in Manhattan for a professor talking about this Professor Eli Bleich, cool guy, is former campaign manager, has been in politics for a while, teaching a course on campaign management. So I went and talked about our race. It was fun. And it brought back a little bit of nostalgia, like being back in a classroom and that sort of thing. And I remember it reminded me of being back in college, and I went to Duke down North Carolina. But I remember going to class, and I remember like this vibe, like mentality, like gotta like buckle my chin strap, like wear a helmet sort of thing, where I was ready to debate in class. I'm ready to be told I was wrong. And I was a public policy major, so there was a lot of that. I remember I grew up in a Republican household, moderately Republican household, and one of my first professors, a professor named Jessica Boone, she was wonderful, but she was shaved head, open lesbian, like probably as far left as you could go, and we fought all the time. She challenged me all day long. But in that class, I learned so much about the left. I learned so much about what it's like growing up a lesbian in the United States of America. I learned it's one of the few professors I actually have communicated with since I've graduated, where in order for people to learn about other people's views, you have to let them speak their mind and then get punched. And when I was in the classroom at NYU, I felt that I had this sense, and I can see that the students felt it. I don't know, there's a feeling, but like, you can't say the wrong thing. It was like, I felt like I wasn't ready for battle. I was ready to just kind of massage what we all are supposedly agreeing to what is right. And I do think that's a massive problem, because if you have young people that aren't willing to speak and be proven wrong and then learn, I don't think that's good learning. And so to Bari Weiss and the crew, I think this is a good thing if it's open dialogue. I don't know what you think, if you had that experience in college too, but it hit me hard.
My favorite thinker in this space is Jonathan Haidt, who's been on the podcast. Started something called the Heterodox Academy, which
he's one of the academics in this.
And so it surprises me zero that Jonathan's involved with the University of Austin. I think that there is a need for an environment of just open intellectual inquiry, and you can say something that other people would consider very problematic or troublesome, and you're not going to be demonized or villainized for it. People may disagree with you, but the big thing in American life that is going wrong for us right now is that we are projecting that someone who disagrees with us on something is worth less as a human being than we are. At the extreme, we're dehumanizing them. We're saying that they are worth less, actually, and that's going to tear us apart it's going to destroy us. So any environment where people can say what's on their mind and not be attacked for it, I think is a win. You know, that you shouldn't have this intellectual conformity or uniformity, because if you do, then you know, people don't learn as much, in my view, and they become more timid intellectually,
or entrenched in their ways. Like Professor Boone like made me more of a Democrat, like, and that's, you know, set me on that path, and that's how I met you, right? So I
owe her a massive favor.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's okay to be wrong as long as you're open-minded to learn, right? When you're wrong. No, look, there are words you could say that are really hurtful, and you got to be mindful of that. But anyway, so University of Austin, it's uaustin.org. I'm plugging it for it because it's great, and you're going to be on Bari's podcast soon. So did you talk about this at all? Talk about education a bit?
It hadn't been announced, so I don't think we do.
Okay. So there's Peter Boghossian's in here, Bari Weiss, Caitlin Flanagan. There's a couple named, but Glenn Lowry, John McWhorter, I think, is involved in this. Jonathan Haidt. Worth checking out. And they have it's a summer program for now, and then they'll start doing some graduate programs, and then undergraduate supposedly starts in 2024. I'm a big fan of new universities starting. So,
amen. Why are we just all lurching around being like, oh, universities, they're so expensive. Oh, universities, like, you know, there aren't enough of them. Why don't we just start some new universities?
It's so true.
If you're listening to this, start your own university. I'm kidding. It's a lot. But you know, there was one school, Dartmouth, that said, we're going to try and expand class size by 10%, which is a very, very big deal. Thank goodness. Like, why are you just keeping your class size the same when you know that there's a massive surplus of demand for what you have to offer? You have a mission.
Yep.
You should try and do more of it. And the mission should not be maintain exclusivity. I mean, that's jacked up.
Yep.
So schools should grow. There should be new schools. We should be doing more. And yeah, like, hats off to them for taking on a difficult challenge, because it's not easy. You know, it's one reason why, again, if you're listening to this, you know, starting a university is probably a bridge too far. But, you know, but feel free to do something that your community needs. You know, it's like start a new daycare. You know, it's like you're looking around and there's no daycare that you can be excited about. Start your own. Like that should be the American way, the forward way. And so I too am excited about the University of Austin. Plus, like, I think Austin, Texas, man, that place seems cool, like that. Like, I have friends who've moved there and friends who live there. And like that is like the new frontier zone in a good way. The weather's good, you know. Like, the food
I did my brother's
good.
bachelor party there. It was dynamite.
It's so, you know, like, picked a good hub, picked a catchy name.
Yep. And look, the press, you know, had its way with this announcement, and so did Twitter for sure. But Scott Galloway has a university as well, Section 4, and it's good. It's maybe probably a more liberal version of this, but he's a free thinker and extremely business savvy. So look, I'm a fan of all of this stuff. We shouldn't crucify people trying to build something.
New things.
Yes,
build new things.
Hey, there's a book. Someone wrote a book called "Smart People Build Things," or should build things. I don't remember who wrote that. I heard he was a smart guy though.
Yeah, the prototype.
Oh man! All right,
SBT.
The one that started it all, you could say. All right, we're out of here, man. We've been rambling for a while. Good show.
Yes, and I'm going to be in New York City for a Forward Book Talk on Saturday night, the 13th. We're going to make merry, drink some wine, sign some books, talk about the future. Join us. It's going to be a blast.
City Winery, 7:30, New York City. Andrew Yang doing stand-up comedy. That's
Saturday, November 13th. You will laugh. You will cry. You will drink. It's going to be great.
You'll get a selfie. Maybe I'll be there. You guys are awesome. See you next week.
Ever forward. See you soon.